All right, so I'm here with Culture Thug. Um, and you are a self-described fascist. Am I correct in that?
Yes.
Now, can you explain to me what exactly a fascist is?
Okay. A fascist is it's a branch on the third position tree. I mean, where the ideology comes from is what we call third position ideology, neither right nor left. Now, fascist is term the Italians used it, and it's become like just the mainstream understanding. Just like in communism, you have Marxist Leninists, you had Trotskyites, you had Maoists, but they all kind of fit underneath this blanket of communism. It's the same with fascism. Fascism was an Italian thing. In Germany, they called it National Socialism. In Spain, they called it Phalangism. In Brazil, they called it integralism. Or in Mexico, they called it synarchism. So the ideology is basically what third position ideology is. It is a collectivist ideology. I mean, we are anti individualistic. We believe in building a community. And usually, how you build that community, how third position ideology sees, is through nationhood. So, nationalism is always a strong part of third position ideology. This is how we build our collectivism. We try to create an environment where we look at our fellow citizens as extended family. This is the whole sense of nationalism. It kind of ties into this patriotism. It's not this Ayn Rand super individual. Man is the center of the universe, and everything around him is there for him to exploit at his own will. It's completely opposite of that mentality, which I would say is far right
Uh,
mentality.
well, let me tell you, one of the reasons I wanted to have this debate or conversation or interview or whatever we want to call this
Hmm.
is because I'm frequently accused of being a third positionist, of being a crypto fascist. And I've looked at a lot of your material, and I think there are very, very clear differences between you and I. I do not agree with you. You do not agree with me. And I want those differences to be out there so the whole world can see them. I am absolutely opposed to fascism. And I think fascism is absolutely opposed to Marxism and everything that Marxism and socialism stands for. And I want there to be no ambiguity or confusion about that. And I want that to be absolutely clear. You talk about fascism. I actually have with me Benito Mussolini's autobiography, a 1928 edition of it.
Hmm.
And I read this, I can understand how somebody who is very, very new to things might think he was a Marxist, right? They might say, okay, he's critical of capitalism. He was in a socialist party at one point. But what I find in here is just real love of violence. The wheels of history turn, but through blood. Blood and terror. He hates the Socialist Party because they're not violent enough. They're not doing enough killing. He loves the nation. He betrays the Socialist Party and ends up supporting World War One, which was a horrendous war in which millions of working class people are sent to their deaths, on behalf of capitalists and bankers. And anti-intellectualism. He doesn't believe in books. Books are for fools. He believes in violence and terror and killing. I see something that is purely destructive. I see something that, yes, it may be critical of capitalism, but it seeks death, destruction, and is trying to restore some kind of medieval hierarchy. Am I right about that?
No, I mean, so what you will see is why you're called a third positionist is because a lot of your views are in what we call third position. And we can get into the anti-materialistic approach. This is where third position really differs from Marxism is that, and like I said, nationalistic instead of universalistic. But so to Mussolini and to the violence issue in particular, first, the anti-intellectualism isn't against books. It's against the I guess the limp-wristed methods of the intellectual who will criticize and tear apart everything, and they're full of thought but no action. So, what third position, what Mussolini in particular, and Giovanni Gentile, who is the philosopher behind fascism, who pretty much what Mussolini says whenever he sounds romantic or poetic about fascism, this is something he's taken from Giovanni Gentile. He was their main intellectual there. It was this belief in thought and action. This is where the name cultured thug comes from. It's from a quote from Jonathan Bowden about, pretty much people are, you're either intellectuals where you're non-physically active or you're physically active and you're pretty dumb. And what he said is we need a combination of these political warriors, a modern day cultured thug. And this is kind of where that screen name comes from. And this is from the thought and action of the fascist beliefs, is we need to be not only intelligent, but willing to be fanatic about our beliefs. And as far as the violence, and I've seen you explain like groups like the KKK and Augustus Sol Victus as fascists. They're not. And the violence largely in fascism, in the history of fascism, has been reactionary violence to the left. Communists in Italy, Spain, Germany had already existed, were already committing street violence at that level when you had the Free Corps in Germany, who eventually became the SA in Germany. When fascism finally formed there, they understood, just like we're seeing today, you're seeing an extreme left that is pretty hostile and action orientated. Then you see these conservatives who are very impotent and, you know, they want to always turn the other cheek. So fascism came about, what they call reactionary philosophy, is they saw, okay, you have this fanatical, aggressive street left who's going to win either by bullet or ballot box. We need to be the same. And so then you started having this violence come forth. This is where the black shirts in Italy formed, the Phalange in Spain formed because of this. And in Germany, you had the National Socialist Workers' Party who came from that too. So yes, there's a violent machismo to it, saying we're willing to fight for our beliefs, but it is also on the same side with the communists as well. I think this is where they're pretty similar. They're willing to fight for their beliefs and they're willing to be fanatics with it. I don't think either side monopolizes violence. I think that's just
when you say that you know you see a violent left, and I'm sure you're referring to like Antifa, right? Okay. And I don't agree with their tactics, but Antifa has not killed a single person. I have never heard of a single person that Antifa has killed. Meanwhile, white supremacists, neo-Nazis go into schools and shoot their classmates. They murder random people because of their race on the street all the time. So I'm not seeing this. I'm really not seeing this.
They're not fascists, though. They are white nationalists. That's what I'm saying. They don't adhere to a... So to lump them all in together underneath fascists is where I have the problem. So they are white nationalists. There are certain white nationalists who are libertarians. There are white nationalists who are more authoritative. There are white nationalists that want to bring back the king, for God's sake. So, I mean, that's why they will never have
unity too, right? He was an advocate of the Italian monarchy.
Unfortunately, I think that was more Machiavellian because he was never true leader of his country, like Hitler was of Germany, because he was always under the king. And it was like Mosley in Britain, who was the British Union of Fascists. They also accepted the monarchy. I think they had to. I think that was so intertwined in Italy and in Britain that you couldn't speak out against the king and actually get anywhere. So I would hope...
in Britain, the British royal family were big supporters of Hitler's fascism in Germany, of Italian fascism, and Oswald Mosley attempted a military coup to put King Edward back on the throne and establish a military dictatorship. And it was prevented by communist strikes and protests and all of that. He wasn't able to pull that off. But they wanted to restore an absolute monarchy and put King Edward back on the throne, have a military dictatorship, and Britain be on the wrong side of World War II, if I'm not mistaken. Am I mistaken?
Yeah, you are mistaken. Mosley never even got close to that. Mosley had a party that was, I mean, membership-wise, maybe 5,000, if you're going to say that. There's never something that really got off the ground. There were certain members of the royal family that were friendly towards Hitler and didn't want war with Germany. And there was certain members that were aggressively looking for war, and Churchill was, their dog for that fight. So it's there was never a real attempt to accomplish anything like that. There may have been a rhetoric, there may have been talk, but nothing like that ever came.
Did the British Union of Fascists not have posters all over Britain saying "God save the King"?
Oh yeah, like I said, this is a part. Yeah, but this is a part of the game they have to play. Personally, I would hope, and when I did a video on the British Union of Fascists or on Mosley in particular, I had said, and I got a lot of British people commenting like, you don't understand, what the king is or what the family is. Because I said, hopefully, if he ever got into power, they would take out the king. And that's where Mussolini's fault was too, that he didn't replace the king right away. And therefore, he was able to be arrested by the king when things went bad. So personally, I believe, monarchy is a foolish way. Juche, North Korea is stuck in a pseudo monarchy. And I don't think it's benefited them at all.
That's not the case. North Korea is a country that's under attack, and they're facing blockade and sanctions, and there is a constant attempt to divide the Korean Workers' Party. and play
All
different
true.
factions
All
against each
true.
other.
All
And by
true.
yeah,
With the sanctions and everything, but it
so by
went from
putting
great
the
grandfather
as the
to
leader,
father to
a way to
son.
make clear that the political line has not changed, that they're remaining true to Kim Il Sung's ideology. And in fact, the real extreme cult of personality around Kim Il Sung really started in the 70s when the Soviet Union and China were really, not getting along. And it was a way to make clear they were not for Mao, they were not for the Soviet Union. They had their own great leader, Kim Il Sung, and that was the purpose that the system there formed. And also, it's important to note that the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, I mean, it has a constitution. The Korean Workers' Party is very large, and it's not one man being an autocrat, pounding a podium and making the rules. Now, the level of human rights there is obviously nowhere near what we have in Western countries, but to describe it as one man standing at a podium, pounding there, like that it is in Western media, frequently described that way, I don't think is accurate.
Well, power passed down through birth is what I mean by monarchy. So the grandfather, the father, and the son, it keeps passing. It's not through like merit in any way. So that's what I mean by monarchy. But I agree. They've been blockaded and shut out from the world. It's unfair to judge them for anything that they're doing, actually, because they really have no one to rely on. And when you're part of this axis of evil, as I know as going through your content, whether you're in Iran, whether you're in North Korea, whether you're Syria, they block you off from the world. They starve you. Then they say, oh, look how horrible they are. They're starving their own people. I understand the game, but what I meant was it's just power passed down by birth instead of.
Well, I wanted to talk to you about Libya because, I mean, you are very supportive, as am I. I admire a lot of the accomplishments of Muammar Gaddafi in Libya and the great man-made river and all of that. How do you put that together with being a fascist? Because Mussolini murdered millions of Libyans, right? And in fact, the national hero in Gaddafi's Libya was Omar Mukhtar,
yes,
who fought against Mussolini very heroically.
Heroic man, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, fascism is associated with exactly the kind of colonialism and foreign domination that Gaddafi rose to power fighting against. Gaddafi gave weapons to not weapons, but he gave financial support to the Black Panther Party of the United States. He gave support to the IRA, all kinds of national liberation struggles that were fighting against empires. How would you put fascism with supporting Gaddafi and the Libyan revolution?
So as being a third positionist and having the beliefs in that first you have to understand it's different in every country. So exactly what happened in Italy is not what's going to happen in, let's say, American fascism or American third positionism. As part of also with that, I'm adult enough and mature enough and read enough of through all, different kind of political ideologies, but especially the ones I like, to understand I disagree a lot with a lot of the personal beliefs of people. And I thought this drive to continue on this like British colonialism was a huge mistake on Mussolini's part. He was one of the worst allies to have during the war because Hitler had to keep saving him from every bad decision he was doing, whether it was in North Africa or Greece. So yeah, it's something I've never liked about that. I don't, as a third positionist, I like to be nationalist. I don't want to have colonies. I want other countries to be nationalists.
Wait. Okay. What is the symbol of fascism?
Yes, the sticks, the fasci, the sticks put together
of the Roman Empire. Yeah. Empire is inherent in fascist beliefs, right? Everywhere we've seen fascism, it has been expansionist. The very symbol, and the Roman Empire was a historical abomination. And it wasn't just Libya, it was Ethiopia, where they toppled, an independent Christian monarchy on the African continent. Communists all over the world had rallies, hands off Ethiopia. I feel like just to say that empire and imperialism is separate from fascism, it's a mistake they made. I mean, I'm sorry, but this symbol right here on the cover of the book is the symbol of an empire, right? I mean, the entire name.
It's a symbol of unity. It's a symbol of unity. What it's saying is, take one stick, you can break it over your knee easy. Put a bunch of sticks together, try to break it over your knee, you're going to break your knee. So united, we are stronger. That's what that symbol means. Well, so it has nothing to do with imperialism.
It's the symbol that ancient Roman, authorities would hold while they flogged people, while they executed people. It was a symbol of brute force, colonization, extracting tribute, beating down other nations. Isn't that's what the fascists?
Well, I mean, you can look at Rome like that, or you can look at it as the opposite, that it gave civilization to many barbarians. So I guess it depends how you look at what Rome created and what Rome did. But that symbol, as it was resurrected for the Italian fascists in this modern age, it has nothing to do with every war Rome fought. What it meant and symbolized was our strength through unity. And this is, like I said, we're collectivists at heart. This is a core foundation of third position. And as far as like the imperialism, I mean, we could say the same as Russia expanded as well. In the political philosophy of third position, nowhere does it say we need to expand. Like I said, this is something Mussolini did on his own for visions of grandeur, for the glory of Italy, whatever you can get people to believe into, for whatever reasons they made these, or just to compete with Britain. Because at that time, too, colonialism seemed the way to go. Build a colony here, get the resources for cheap, have this kind of slave labor kind of set up systems. This was kind of the mentality of the time. Like I said, it was a mistake. It's not in the philosophy you'd see in whether it's in Mexico, Brazil, Spain, Romania, wherever else third position political parties have existed. That's not how they operate. Mussolini was an outlier as far as that goes, as far as the philosophy goes.
Well,
that's
Hitler
why
did the same thing. I mean, he was constantly expanding to, into Poland and Sudetenland and you name it. I mean,
Hitler had said he wanted, so this is a different thing though. Hitler had said from the beginning that they're going to take back the land they lost. He never accepted the Versailles Treaty. He never hid the fact that
communists didn't accept the Versailles Treaty either. They rejected it, from the beginning. It was the Social Democratic Party, which was traitorous. It was the Center Party and others. But the Versailles Treaty was an abomination because it made the German working class pay for the crimes of Krupp and Thyssen and the wealthy German bankers that started that war, a war that both Mussolini and Hitler really strongly supported. If you read Mein Kampf, Hitler goes on for pages glorifying it. I mean, and Mussolini was on the opposite side, and he goes on for pages. They love war. I mean, they love killing. They love death. I mean, this is an irrational philosophy. I mean,
okay, so saying they love killing, they love death. I mean, it's a bit dramatic. It's a bit dramatic saying that there's this warrior.
They say it. It's in the book. I mean,
so there's a warrior. No, they don't say I love killing. I love death in the book. Okay. What it is, it's a warrior ethos. They're being patriots for their country. So you have to transform back into time and be an Italian in 1920 and be or in the 19 teens and a German in that time too. This was a call to patriotism. We see how it happens today. We see our young warriors going off to fight these wars that don't benefit us, but they have this belief that they're fighting and dying for America. And they're patriotic about that. We don't say they love death and killing. This is their masculine ethos for their nation, their love being touched into, their patriotism. It's the same thing that makes them political fanatics as well. The same things that made them, become nameless, knownless people to being known throughout the world and controlling parties. It's that same drive that drove them to having this warrior ethos, being a patriot for your country, living and dying for your country, and being a political warrior for your country as well. So I mean, you could sure say they love death. I mean, however you want to spin it, you can do that. But I just don't look at. I see the warrior. I see the beauty.
What was the ultimate outcome for Italy and Germany?
No, it's not good at all. It's not good at all. Listen, I wish it went a different way. I wish there wasn't a World War II. When you talk about expansionism, like the only thing I would say where you really saw that with Germany was the living space in the East they wanted to get, because they thought they needed that living space. That's where you get your little expansionism with them there. Everything with the Versailles Treaty, I mean, like he said he was going to do, living space, the plans for there, I think that's where you had that. And like I said, I wasn't alive at that time. I don't know how condensed their population was and how much agriculture that they actually needed to, feed and grow their nation. But there was definitely, not only Hitler's, a strong belief amongst many German intellectuals that they needed more living space. So you had that aspect, but World War II was horrible. We see it, and look how everything's changed for that. That was capitalism's biggest victory, because after that you killed all the nation states and you created on one side of the world communism and on the other side unadulterated capitalism, and that became the two conflicting forces throughout our next 50 years. And what I grew up in and what you grew up in, those were the two major narratives. Now, post-communism, it's pretty much the same. Now you have the axis of evil is the only thing against this.
Coming out of the Second World War, in Italy, you had a huge surge in membership in the Italian Communist Party because the communists were so loved for forming those partisan brigades and fighting against Mussolini. In France, the Communist Party surged in membership, and they won elections. They were kind of forced to step out of the government by the United States, essentially, in the Marshall Plan. But people admired them for La Resistance and all of that. People saw what went on in the concentration camps. They were horrified by it. The world was horrified by it. The Soviet Union said, we've been trying to form an anti-fascist coalition since Hitler came to power, and the West has been ignoring us, and that seemed to be a moment where people kind of recognized that the communists had been right. And then Western intellectuals spent decades trying to equate communists with Nazi Germany in order to try and obscure that fact that communists were anti-fascist, consistently anti-fascist, and that the world was horrified by fascism and horrified by what was going on.
Big capitalism was horrified by fascism. Working class this is where fascism comes from, is working class. Big capital, big banks are horrified. Globalists are horrified.
Henry Ford wasn't horrified by fascism. He loved Hitler. He loved Mussolini. Henry Ford loved them. And then he also had to capitulate too. He spoke his mind for a minute, and he had the Dearborn Independent and all of that. Yes, and he also had to capitulate. You couldn't be a supporter of fascism. Look at Ezra Pound. They put him in a mental institution. One of our greatest poets in American history put him in a mental institution till his death because he supported fascism. So yeah, they really clamped that down. And then so communism, it was allied with to help destroy fascism. And then what happens? Capitalism turns on communism. So it's like you make a deal with the devil, you're going to get burned in the end. And that's what happened. Voters paid to put Father Coughlin on the radio and put his pro-fascist sermons all across the country. And that was paid for by General Motors. There were many capitalists in the United States who really thought Hitler was great and thought that Mussolini was great because they crushed labor unions and they crushed social movements, and they created a military-industrial complex. If you look at what the German economy was, they called it National Socialism. Barely anything was really nationalized. I mean, it was a huge military-industrial complex. They built the Autobahns. They put a bunch of people in concentration camps. They hired a bunch of people to be concentration camp guards. They started military spending again. It was a military-industrial complex.
Healthcare was nationalized. Education was nationalized. They had full paid for healthcare. They had full paid for education. Merit decided if you went to the best universities, not money anymore. They nationalized the economy. I mean, let's make no mistake about that. They nationalized the economy.
All the auto companies were still private. The steel manufacturing was private. All the major industries were private.
Import export became nationalized. So difference between the communist model and the German model is there was not ownership, because in communism or in Soviet Russia, from my understanding, like 90% of industry was central planning. In Germany, not so much so. The whole economy was not controlled by central planning, but at times there's a certain laws and rules to follow. When they're violated, state steps in and they can do whatever they want. And they did that repeatedly.
Bonapartism. It was one section of the ruling class, the industrial capitalists, seizing control of the government and using it to suppress their rivals.
It was Hitler seizing control of the government.
Hjalmar Schacht. Hitler took power because a big banker named Hjalmar Schacht picked him and said, he's our guy. And he had to go around and convince all the other capitalists to like him. They said, oh, there's too much red on that flag. And Hjalmar Schacht said, no, don't worry. He's not a communist. And then the night on the long knives, Hitler exterminated the wing of his own party that even advocated some form of socialism. And they got rid of, Strasser and Ernst Rem and all of them. I mean, they were awful folks too, but they at least believed in some of the socialistic rhetoric that went along with the anti-Semitism and the hate. He exterminated them. And you just got this big military state. I mean, it was a disaster. And then they needed a war. That was the thing. They couldn't not go to war. It wasn't about living space. It was about the fact their whole economy was centered around building war airplanes and tanks and bombs and all kinds of things. And they were on the brink of a collapse if they didn't go to have the big war that they'd set out to start out with.
All right. So you're saying a lot of things. I have to walk back some of it so we can address these things because you're giving a narrative that's all too often repeated and not completely accurate. So as far as Hitler with big business, Hitler was in control of the government. Hitler was in control of big business. No one can come there and defy any wishes of him. So there's not this banker ruling over Nazi Germany.
Hjalmar Schacht didn't exist.
Hjalmar Schacht did exist, and he tried to quit so many times because Hitler was driving him crazy. Hitler used him because, as you noted, he had international connections. He's the person if you want someone in the banking world to talk to other world banking people to try to get some for your country, that's the slime ball you want doing it. So that's a move that, once again, it was troublesome because Schott tried to play the old job. Hitler's telling him, no, we're doing it like this. They fought often, and Schott tried to resign so many times, even did, and had to get called back, and then finally got pushed away when they knew we had as much as we can have or get out of you and you're done. So it's not like he had any kind of influence in what decisions Hitler would make for his state. Now, as far as
the guy who invented the Autobahns, he developed that policy during Weimar Germany and sat on it because he didn't want the Weimar government to be stable. And then he came up with the Autobahn policy. And I believe he was responsible for taking Hitler around to Krupp, to Tyson, to all the other industrial capitalists, and convincing them that Hitler was okay, he wasn't a threat to their power, and letting Hitler march into power. Right?
They learned how quick
anointed Hitler as the Chancellor of Germany.
And they learned how quickly they were wrong about that. They thought they can, because he was only a trench private in World War I who was on this nationalist party that had caught fire. They thought they can dominate him intellectually. They thought they learned. So John Tollin's biography on Hitler is a great book that kind of breaks down where you see, and he's not a fan of Hitler at all. But anyways, it kind of goes to that these industrialists, these intellectuals, these old generals in the military, one by one thought, okay, we can control him. Don't worry. One by one, they thought that. And one by one, they were proven wrong. So you're gonna look at it from the spectrum you're looking at it through, and I'm looking at it through the spectrum I'm looking at it through. So we're seeing the same thing, but we interpret it different. But I want to touch on what you're talking about with Rahm and Strausser. So there was a more ideologically, economically left aspect of the NSDAP, and there was a split amongst that. And even before Night of the Long Knives, there was an ideological split, especially when Hitler, around 23, 24, after getting out of prison for the putsch, that's when it really started solidifying. And that's when Hitler's like, well, okay, the only way we're going to be able to get in here is if we're able to convince some of these big industry people that we're not going to take all their land, take all their business and do this, that we'll work with them. And this was the big split between people like Antoine Drexler, who was the original creator of the NSDAP, the Strausser brothers. And then Rahm was more concerned. He was also more political leftist, but he was more concerned because the SA wouldn't become the military. And they were street fighters, essentially, and you couldn't have them in the military. So Night of the Long Knives came mainly because Rahm was kept making noise about the SA not being in as the accepted official military of Germany. And then Hitler begrudgingly, I would say Night of the Long Knives, people that can take the real credit is Himmler and Goering. They drew up the lists. A lot of innocent people got killed during that didn't deserve it. Gregor Strausser being one of them, who's, Strausser's ideology is another ideology I'm familiar with and enjoy many aspects of the syndicalist economic system. And so it was a shame to see some good people like that die because it was a power move. It was what happened in Rome 2,000 years ago when they drew up this conscript list. Same thing.
I don't want to spend too much more time on Hitler, but I'll just say I've read Ernst Rehm's autobiography, and I wouldn't describe him as leftist at all. I mean, it's just pages and pages. I killed communists here. I killed communists here.
Economically, economically left. Okay.
I mean, he wanted to
they believed
operatives, I guess, but I don't see anything left about it. They
believed in taking all the land from the elites and dishing it out to the citizens. They believed in abolition of private property. They believed the hierarchy, the aristocracy should be replaced, all their property taken from.
Communists already believed that, and they had millions of people in their party.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I mean when I say left, as far as economically left. They believe those similar things, and these are the things that the NSDAP split over, these kind of issues.
Okay. Well, I wanted to ask you, you have pointed out that, you are opposed to capitalism, right?
Yeah.
But in right-wing circles, I hear nothing but worship of capitalism. And this doesn't apply simply to like the alt-right or the alt-light or whatever. If you listen to the American Nazi Party, George Lincoln Rockwell, his entire approach is, I hate communism. I love capitalism. Oh, and communists are all Jews, so therefore you should love Hitler, right? The entire focus of the far right is we hate communists. We want to defend capitalism from these dirty, rotten communists. We communists believe in racial equality. We're racist. It's just communists are the enemy. American capitalism is great, and communists are messing it up with reforms and all of that. And I just don't, you are an outlier. I know historically in Europe, the far right was different and all of that. But why is it that people in the United States who are attracted to fascism don't share your criticism of capitalism?
Because, well, first, thanks to the media, I guess, when you put such a dumbed down image of a political ideology out there, you attract all kinds of people like that. It became, this is why I even started the whole Culture Thug account. All I'm essentially doing is reading third position philosophy and history books out loud and making videos over them, because I saw like how uneducated these people were, calling themselves fascist, and then having to get lumped in with that, knowing they haven't read a book in their whole lives about the philosophy. They haven't picked up something, the origins and doctrines of fascism, that lays out the philosophy of it. I knew, you could just tell right away they don't know what the hell they're talking about. And because they heard on TV, fascism is authoritative racism. And so they go right towards that. Now they're fasci this, fasci that. It's insulting. Maybe I am the outlier as far as what's mainstream accepted, but I'm accurate in my beliefs and how I label myself. That's why I can call myself that, because I don't view it as a pejorative, this Pavlovian pejorative created that means everything you hate. That's everything that's evil. That's a fascist. That's why the left says, oh, it's the right that are fascist. And the right says, that's the left that are fascist. And actual fascists are very rare, and they're usually will admit, yeah, I'm a fascist, I'm a third positionist, and here's why. And you try to explain your ideology. So you're associating these right-wing people who are libertarian, and Augustus Solvictus, libertarian, and you're calling them a fascist. These people aren't fascists. They're not. I mean, I wish all the people accused of being fascists were actually like political fascists. Then I don't know, we might actually have some kind of third position party coming about. But
let me ask you though.
Mm-hmm.
Ayn Rand's book Atlas Shrugged, right?
Yeah.
Which is, that's just loved on the right wing in the United States among libertarians. Whittaker Chambers, who was an anti-communist, he was the editor of National Review. He read the book and he condemned it. And he said, from every page, there's a voice that says, to the gas chamber go. And he immediately heard Hitler and fascism in Ayn Rand's book, right? And Mussolini, we know that he would torture people by forcing them to drink castor oil and shit their pants in front of everybody, right? You know what I mean? That and shit until they died. You can read about this, right? And that there is this kind of sadism, this cruelty, this desire. Communists, did they kill people? Were there executions? Of course. But it was not done in a public way where people are shitting their guts out, so that you can get this gleeful pleasure from killing them. And all these people that don't agree with you, are attracted to fascism, not because they agree with your economic theories, but because they like the idea. They like what Mussolini said. History moves through blood, killing, racism, torture. They're attracted to all these barbaric things that the fascist movement really embraced. And again, if you're against capitalism, if you're just purely against capitalism, why not be a communist? I mean, why be a fascist?
Oh, like I was explaining earlier, first we're an anti-materialistic ideology. Communism, we charge both capitalism and Marxism with reducing men to economics. I mean, they look at all of man's problem is economics. So we're completely different on that. We're very anti-materialist as far as that goes. We believe in, even though we're idealistic in a sense, we believe in kind of in a sense of the Nietzschean overman, that with the proper society, the proper environment, the possibility of man is unimaginable. And we feel like we're squandering that time on Earth, our short time on Earth, arguing about the silly things we argue about, when we should be star hopping, when we should be exploring all the wonders of life and using our resources towards things like that. So this third position ideology is one of the only ideologies I've seen represent these kind of feelings in politics, where I don't see them with the Marxist or with the capitalist or the libertarian or any of these people. And because you get, and the same with you. I mean, like you said, you don't attach yourself to Antifa or a lot of the freaks that are going to, or, the jazz hand communists at the meetings and all this silly stuff. They can't even clap. I mean, what would working class people 60 years ago think about this kind of madness? So as you have to deal with too, your political belief is going to attract a lot of broken toys, and so does mine. That's just the reality we have to reach or understand today, and try to sift out who's serious about it, and then this is how you get, political discussions and organizations going. So I think you can't say because, oh, there's a bunch of trolls online calling themselves fascists and wishing gas chambers on people, that this represents actual political fascism. Because none of them have spent a second trying to convince someone of what fascist economics is or philosophy is. None of them. All they do is troll and say the nastiest things they can. This is not what a fascist or third position is at all.
Oddly, I guess I want to address 2 points you made. First of all, in terms of the left, the distortion of leftism that has happened, right? And we know that the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, through funding something called the Congress for Cultural Freedom, bringing into being figures like Susan Sontag, MK Ultra, promoting drug use. There has been a huge effort to distort leftism, but oddly, they've distorted it in a way that is actually closer to fascism. For example, right, in Europe in the 1930s, the mainstream view was Christianity, and the left were atheists and materialists, and it was the fascists that embraced paganism and mysticism, right? And now that's in the leftist circles, right? And then the Dalai Lama is worshipped. He was, very, very friendly to the Third Reich and all of that. The Dalai Lama is now worshipped in leftist circles, and Malthusianism, right? And the idea there's too many people in the world and human race is a cancer and we need to drastically reduce the human population. What, they call it eco-fascism. It's very popular on the internet, of these people who believe in, because of global warming, we need to drastically reduce the human population. This stuff is popular in leftist circles, right? And that stuff is not Marxism. That stuff, and that stuff is far closer to fascism.
It's not fascism either. I mean, we can go through each fascist organization, and none of them were built pagan societies. I know you might try to refer to Nazi Germany.
Does Nivola say the goal was
Nivola's not a fascist. He's hard right. He has 2 works, critique of fascism from the far right and critique of National Socialism from the far right. Nivola was extreme right, traditionalist, did not like fascism, had his qualms with it, and especially he became more vocal about it long after Italy had failed. But he's not a fascist. I don't know why he gets tied into being a fascist thinker. He was a fascist criticizer.
What about Alfred Rosenberg and the myth of the 20th century?
Yep, Rosenberg. So
you're condemned Christianity because it was too kind, it was too caring and compassionate. They wanted Odinism and brute force and right.
So you have individuals who had their beliefs, but these weren't things like Nazi Germany was numerically a Christian. Germany was a Christian country. That didn't change much during the Nazi reign. It was more individuals with their beliefs. It was not and then you had like serious Catholic and Christian minded, like the Iron Guard of Romania, the Flange in Spain, who were very hardcore Christians and very Orthodox old school Christians too in their beliefs, very mystical in their Christian belief. So getting paganism or all this, individuals may have believed what they believed, but as far as a fascist party, like openly promoting and advancing anything that was, most of them were intertwined with Christianity because that was the dominant religion in Europe at the time. So it's not what's happening is, I don't know if you've noticed, but now all of a sudden the communist advocate is, the transgender purple-haired cat lady. Like, I don't know how they became fighters for the working class all of a sudden. But yeah, you are having that element, maybe even hijacking the economic left, I would say. It seems to be filled with a lot of neoliberals, more so than economic left people, is at least the complaint I've been hearing from socialists, myself at least. So it's, you have your freaks that are attracted to those things, but you can't, say, are you going to say now all of communism is, trannies with purple hair fighting for what bathrooms they can use? No, of course not. But that's what you have. You do have that. The other
thing, though, is that, we've learned a lot from the 20th century. And I don't think it's accurate. Starting with Stalin, right? Stalin re-legalized the Russian Orthodox Church. They made movies promoting Alexander Nevsky and Ivan the Terrible and promoting, Russia's past as a nation. But now, you've got Nicolas Maduro and Hugo Chavez that are both Roman Catholic and are deeply religious, right? In China, they maintain dialectical materialism, but there's a revival of Confucianism. And this idea that communism is hostile to traditional cultures, hostile to spirituality, I think is very outdated. I think that's very 20th century. And that was rooted in the fact that the church played a very different role in the time of Marx, and things are different nowadays. And I think that communism is not purely materialist. I think most communists in the world, maybe not in the United States, but in the world, are closer to where I'm at, where they respect religion, they respect the values that come from it. They just don't like it being used as a tool for oppression, right? And what I find to be particularly interesting is in Latin America, for example, right? There is a mass fascist belief system all over Latin America, South America, Brazil. But those folks are the foot soldiers of Western capitalism and neoliberalism, right? The folks who admire Franco in South America, they're not supporting Maduro against international capitalism or something. They're in the streets burning things, burning food warehouses, trying to overthrow the Venezuelan government, right? In Bolivia, the admirers of Mussolini and Hitler overthrew Evo Morales, the anti-imperialist. So in Latin America, I see fascists as the foot soldiers of neoliberalism fighting against socialism. So, where's the third positionism?
So that's funny, because I'd say the same thing about the communists here. But first, Franco is not a fascist. Franco is a traitor to fascism. He had Jose Primo de Rivera killed in prison, let him get killed, then put the next leader of the Falange in prison, and then, destroyed the party. He was authoritative, traditionalist. He worked within the neoliberal economic system as well. He's often someone that gets called a fascist when it couldn't be more wrong. He actually killed fascists. And like I said,
why did Hitler and Mussolini give him air support during the Spanish Civil War?
Because they were A, to fight the left, the anarchists and the communists there. B, hoping he would repay the favor during World War II, which he didn't. I mean, Franco was a coward. He only went into the Civil War when he thought they had a winning chance. And that's when he came into it. Now, like, everyone knew, all the old Falange members, they all spit on the name Franco because of what he did to the Falange and everything. So he gets called a fascist. I get it. It's always been one of my pet peeves. I'm sure there's people that get labeled communist that you're like, well, no, he's not.
Let me just ask you. I'll ask you about different leaders. Is Pinochet a fascist?
No, Pinochet's not a fascist, no.
Okay. What about in Singapore? I've heard people say that Lee Kuan Yew is a fascist. Is he a fascist?
No, I wouldn't call him a fascist. There's to both these people, there is third position elements to their political philosophy, but yeah, no, I wouldn't say he was a third positionist in itself.
Now, what about Bolsonaro in Brazil? Is he a fascist?
No. Yeah, he's like a Trump. No, yeah.
Okay. Interesting. I'm curious. Now, what about Rios Montt in Guatemala? Was he a fascist?
I'm not familiar with him, so I couldn't tell you. Yeah.
Okay. What about the current president in Bolivia, who was just installed by the United States? Is she a fascist?
No, she's not a fascist. Not at all.
Okay. So who in the world would you consider to be fascist?
Today, nobody. Me. I mean, it's
okay.
Yeah, no, there is no political figure out there. You have Casa Pound in Italy, okay? There's a good organization of a fascist organization there. Casa Pound in Italy is one of the few actual third position political parties around. There's no one, mainstream media, everyone they've called fascist, and none of them, like everyone that gets accused, Ben Shapiro, for God's sakes, Milo gets called a fascist, and then Antifa gets called a fascist. No one that's been accused of being a fascist in the mainstream is an actual third position. It's none of them. None of them advocate for it. None of them speak about it. None of them can tell you a damn thing about it. They can feed into some media narrative, like I said, racist, authoritarian, and that's it. That's the only narrative most people know, and that's the only narrative most people judge it from. Like I said, it's literally a Pavlovian, bell ringing, get a certain trigger out of you, pejorative. Anything you find that's evil, you say, that's fascist, that's fascist. Both sides do it to each other. And that's all it's become. It's become an insult. It's nothing more than that. That's why everyone calls everyone that. And unfortunately, there's people that don't see themselves as being bad people, who believe in this ideology, who thinks it's the best thing for our country. It's what can even get this very diverse country to at least believe in this common, big tent belief of America. Like what benefits America, even though we're all different, race, ethnicity, cultural areas in America, religions, that maybe we can get underneath this nationalist ideal of America, and what benefits America benefits us all, and we can work towards that. Like that's third position. That's what I think None of these people.
Obama. That's what Obama said.
No, that's empty platitudes from Obama. Obama didn't mean. Come on.
We're going to get post-racial society. We're going to get all over it. You know, he said when they went to kill bin Laden, some of them were black, some of them were white, but they were all Americans. That's the mantra of the Obama administration.
That's mantra, but that's what that is. An empty mantra. That's all. Just like Hillary Clinton. What did she run under? Her slogan? United we are stronger. I mean, there's nothing about her that wants to unite us and make us stronger. I mean, come on, all these, you've been covering politics long enough. You know it's a bunch of sociopaths who don't give a damn about the people and only use the people to make themselves climb higher up the ladder. Like, what do? They
need class struggle and the workers to organize for their own rights and fight against the bosses. And demand things like healthcare and education, and I mean, is that not what I mean? I don't see unity and national unity and everyone obeying the leader as the answer. I see the answer as being, more class struggle, more class consciousness. I mean, is that not what this calls for?
No, that doesn't. That just divides us more. We're so divided, and especially this country. Like, just look at this country. We are so different races, a history here that has a lot of people fighting each other still over 200 years ago. I mean, we have a reality we're dealing with this in country that the worst thing we can do is keep making it more and more identitarian. Class warfare, race warfare, religion warfare. I mean, we're going to be
opposed to white nationalism and white separatism then.
Yeah. America is a multiracial country. We've been dealt a hand. You can't put in your hand and wish for a better hand. You have to play the hand you're dealt. This is the America. Of course, would you want more homogeneity in a country? Of course you would. I mean, diversity is our greatest strength. The empty mantra, they say. Truth is, homogeneity is a true strength. Diversity is something we're going to have to figure out how to work with and still make this place succeed for us all. So that's more of the mentality. So when you bring up Obama, they're just empty words. You know what it's about.
But often this call for just plain national unity is a cover to hoodwink the workers. Like the Democrats for a long time pushed this thing they call the National Service Initiative. And on the surface of it, it sounds great, right? Before you go to college, you do 2 years, whether you go into the military or you do service. But what that would do, it would take the job away, from government employees and have young people do it for free, right? Young people would build our bridges for free. Young people would build our highways. Young people would deliver the mail for free, right? And it's for the good of the country, national unity, right? But it takes away good paying government jobs, right? Volunteerism under capitalism is often an excuse. It's kind of like welfare to work, right? In the cases where they were replacing good paid government workers with women trying to get their welfare check. You would have to do the job of a government employee in order to get their aid to, low income families or whatever it was called. Right. And it's this hustle where it's like, well, we're going to make everyone do their fair share. They're not making Wall Street do their fair share. They're not making the billionaires do their fair share. Right. I mean, this stimulus package. Right. It's supposed to be for the good of the country, but they're bailing out the bankers and we're lucky if we'll get $1,200. This is national unity tends to serve the bosses and the bankers. Does it not?
Why throw the baby out with the bathwater? So that's who runs our system. I mean, that's what it is. It's international finance. There's no one. So when I talk to people about like, how can you make a change? Like, you can't elect one person to change anything. You need to empty, Congress. This system needs to be changed from the ground up. And is that possible? Who knows? But all I know is, yes, we have a corrupt system. They're going to use everything. So we have that sense of patriotism. Like we want to believe in this extended family of our nation and do good for it. So yes, they feed off of that, just like they feed off our lower instincts with fast food and pornography and booze. And they know how to work us. They know how to feed off of us. I mean, they've learned. So it's Edward Bernays. He changed the whole advertisement and political propaganda game. Using Freudian techniques to tap into the basic desires of men and women. And they're masters at doing that. So, they can play on our nationalism. Does that make nationalism a bad thing? No, it doesn't. It means we need good people.
Fascism as a movement do the exact same thing. Wasn't Hitler appealing to Freudian desires for a father figure? If you watch, for example, the movie, Leni Riefenstahl's movie, it's old men talking to young men. There's a big parade at the end to remind everyone of how they marched in the Prussian schools before World War I. It was propaganda and molding the mind of the public, brainwashing, whatever you want to call it. That was a big part of fascism, was it not?
Propaganda is a method. Propaganda is not in itself a bad thing. There's good propaganda and bad propaganda. So what, as opposed to like propaganda of today, which we see the results in America. We're obese as hell. We're on more booze than ever. We're killing ourselves more than ever. We're overdosing more than ever. So we see the effects of the propaganda there. I'd say you wouldn't find a fat kid in the Hitler Youth. I mean, their propaganda was build you up, make you something great, believe in this greatness, believe in the greatness of yourself, of your nation. So yeah, propaganda is a method. It's a science, but it's not a bad, it's a way of getting a message across. Keep it simple, stupid, and repeat. That's the best propaganda, our method of propaganda. Everyone does it. It's a way of getting a message out there. It's a successful way, as we've learned, of getting a message out there.
And
so yeah, of course.
This gets to something else that I find in Mussolini and other things, right? That shouldn't the goal be to empower the population as much as possible, bring them into political leadership, wake them up, not have them be, in a trance, brainwashed by propaganda, but empower them. But in fascist literature, I'm surprised I see open objection to the concept of democracy, right? I mean, the goal of socialism and eventually communism is to expand democratic participation, involve millions of people in the political process. Fascism seems to celebrate the fact that some people are the rulers and some people obey, right? It seems to see the masses of people as just kind of cogs in a machine, and in some cases as a problematic horde that needs to be controlled. I mean, the Nazi state worked very, very hard to reduce its own population, sterilize people. Political dissidents were sterilized, disabled people were sterilized. They were trying to reduce their population, trying to breed people like animals, telling people who they could marry, trying to basically see the people
Eugenics.
as what. Yeah. I mean, this is so. I again, like, you're saying propaganda is, you're saying the capitalist propaganda of the United States is bad, but you could have good propaganda in fascism. But shouldn't the goal be to wake people up and empower them?
So I think that's a bit naive in how the masses are. I think when we look at the always concern with fascism people have is, the tyranny of the dictator. That's always people's fear. But, I would argue the worst tyranny in human history is the tyranny of the masses. You have a people, because the mass voice or the mass mind is usually spoken to at the most simplest level. And this is what our politicians have been feeding off of. And like I said, keeping us separate. So when we look at hierarchy through merit, through earned hierarchy, when you have someone, and Rome is a great example of this. So you would have good dictators and bad dictators throughout the 1,000 years of Rome. And the bad dictators, they didn't live too long. It's always a misnomer happening. The good dictators lived quite a while, unless something natural got them. The bad dictators always died pretty early into their career of being a bad dictator, because it's easy to know who
imperial Rome, the emperors.
Yes, it's easy to know. Yeah. Post Julius Caesar, Rome. So it's easy to know who's responsible for what's going wrong when all responsibility comes to the hierarchy. In today's society, like I said, you couldn't have one person change anything. You would have to change the whole system. And then you have a system who relies on, snake oil salesmen, the masses. And like I said, they pander to the bottom rung of the ladder and they serve the highest rung on the ladder. And this has been our political system since I've been alive. We're caught in this process of insanity of every 4 years repeating this process and not getting an actual change for it. But we continue this process. So in my opinion, and in the third position opinion, the worst tyranny is that of the masses, more so than an individual man ever could be.
I mean, and again, here you don't sound that different than the neocons, right? I mean, that was Leo Strauss, who is the godfather of neoconservatism, taught his students that they were philosopher kings. His favorite television show was Gunsmoke.
Neocons. That's Plato.
Well, yes, Leo Strauss was a Platonic, professor of philosophy. But he said Gunsmoke was his favorite television show, that Americans should come to understand TV like it's a Western, international politics like it's a Western movie or something like that. I mean, this is the neocon attitude, and that ordinary people need to be just kind of treated like children and made to see the world in black and white. And these smart people that are qualified at Harvard and Yale and understand philosophy, they should run the world. I mean, that's Irving Kristol. That's Paul Wolfowitz. That's the view of the neocons. That's the Bush administration.
No,
right?
they want the neocons to rule the world. See, it's not acknowledging how mass psychology is not reducing them to being little children. It's just acknowledging the reality of the mass psychology. And we have a long history of seeing people tap into this and work it and use it for better or worse. There's been great times people have been able to tap into these kind of messages. And I'm sure you can bring up Lenin for yourself about how he was able to work through his speeches and get people convinced. So it's not reducing people to children. It's just acknowledging the mass psychology. And as far as these neocons, I mean, if they had their way, people like me would be shot. So, I mean, it's very far from anything a neocon would ever be. And I think, thankfully, neocons started showing me, seeing just during the Iraq War, how bloodthirsty they were and how they drew up the plans before anything ever happened. Really, really highlighted how deceitful people in government were, where at times I may have been naive and trusted, this system. So, yeah, there's nothing...
But the day after 9/11 is kind of what you say fascism is, where we're all united as a country. We're united behind our leader. I mean, that's what you want to achieve. So why do you object?
That was a beautiful... So was that not a pretty interesting feeling? Because contrast that with coronavirus now and all the toilet paper gone, the old people, the senior citizens, completely forgotten about, not cared for, as everyone hoarded everything that the disease would affect the worst, couldn't even get for themselves. So contrast that with what happened after 9/11, when everyone had American flags, everyone loved each other, we were in this together. That was a pretty powerful feeling, and that was the only time in my life I've experienced that, what I've read in history books about nationalism and how a nation came together as family. That was the only time in my life I've experienced that. And I've only smallly experienced things like that on sports teams and whatnot, of this brotherhood. So that was pretty awesome feeling. And yes, that's what third position wants to tap into and wants to have as a permanent basis, as opposed to, like, right now, it's disheartening to see how we as a nation of people, and to think we're going to have to rely on each other to get through all this. It's pretty depressing. And I do think the people to blame for that is our media, our politicians, and our financial institutions, and they should be held accountable for that. And I do think with them replaced, whether, you're a leftist, I'm a fascist, he's a this, he's a that, whatever our disagreements are, we can easily agree that the people in control of the media outlets and the politics and finance are not for our interest, and we need to find people that are actually for our interest and try to get them in positions of power. And so that's where the mentality is at. So yes, it's tapping into that post 9/11 feeling that lasted too short and too fast. I mean, it was gone within months, but it was some
results, though. I mean, the invasion of Iraq.
Yeah, they used it against us. I know. It's disgusting. Yeah, it's horrible. It's
and again,
I watched one of your
national
videos.
Unity under capitalism, national unity in this kind of situation, it ends up being the people that get screwed. I mean, and if anything, we should have a spirit of class struggle, right? I mean, should we not?
Like I said, we're dividing. So my opinion, if and economics is something that I think Americans really need to get together and figure out what a platform would be. But if I was to say about economics, our mentality from a third position point of view is not to erase the classes, but bring them closer together. I do think a cap should be put on individual wealth, like Huey P. Long did. Huey P. Long had a lot of good ideas that unfortunately he was assassinated early, and he was also with Father Coughlin and all them. But he believed in a personal cap on wealth. I do too. I do think the innovators, they're going to have enough money to live their rich life, but I think it's ridiculous to have people like Bezos or Gates that can literally change the direction of the world through their decisions and how they spend their money. I think that's crazy to give that to any company, that kind of power, without some kind of a national oversight. And I also believe in the Italian either corporatist model or national syndicalist model. So it is those kind of economic philosophies bring the classes closer together. You put a cap on wealth. I think it's okay if we're different and someone makes a little more money for a different job. That's fine. I think we should have a society where even the ditch digger doesn't have to worry about debt. And I think that can be created. And like I said, we would agree on nationalizing or socializing, whatever you want to call it, healthcare and education, right? Education shouldn't be a thing for the wealthy now that get to go to the Ivy League schools. It should be people of merit, no matter what your birth is, that are going to the Ivy League schools. That's what we want there anyway. So, yeah, there would be a lot of similarities on economics, but no, splitting the classes against each other, that's, like I said, they're everything. We're divided on every little, we can't even agree on a gender anymore. I don't know what the hell is going on in this country. So it's getting crazy. And the last thing we want to do is find more reasons to be divided on these things, because the same people feeding on my corpse are the same ones feeding on your corpse. And they're not looking out for either of us as we sit here divided and we fight over these little, I want to read you this quote. I want to read you this quote real fast because I had put this. Jose Antonio Primo de Rivera was the head of the Falange. He was killed in prison by a leftist execution squad in there simply for being a fascist. And his last statement was, "You will see now that no ideological gulfs separate us. If we men knew one another, we should realize that these great gulfs we think we see are nothing but little valleys." And this is where I think we're at in this world. We have a lot of things, because you have this whole image of what fascism was, and I was sitting here telling you, no, he's not a fascist, he's not a fascist, I'm a fascist. And like I said, I can easily back that up because, once again, I'm the only one putting the content out there that's actually trying to educate people as to what the political philosophy is, as opposed to all these other people that get called a fascist haven't said that about themselves or haven't hipped one person to what the ideology is in their life. And we have too much of this, and I'll have a perceived view of many on the left too. And it's only through conversations like this that we see, where do we disagree and where do we agree?
Well, and we've done that here, and we should probably wrap up. I mean, I will say though that I don't think this is a small gulf. This is a small valley. I mean, I think of World War II and the millions who died. I think of the concentration camps. I think of 26 million Russians killed by Nazi invaders. And fascism is not appealing to me at all. And I think of Henry Ford and the way he treated his workers when they tried to unionize. I think of Ku Klux Klan terror and the Black Legion, that murdered the father of Malcolm X, and we're big admirers of Mussolini. Fascism is abhorrent to me, and I associate it with mass death, terror, and killing.
That's why it's abhorrent to you. I could say the same for communism. That's what I'm saying. We could sit here and nitpick through history of deaths and everything, and that's just going to keep these little valleys big gulfs because, like I said, fascist is just a Pavlovian pejorative now. Everything you saw evil, people killing, Malcolm X, or who'd you say? And then
Malcolm X's
father, Ku Klux Klan, et cetera. Yeah, all these people, you named everything off evil in your life, mass murder, mass death. This is all fascist. This is what I'm saying. So maybe you will and other people will support something third position when it's introduced under a different name, and it's just because there's so much stigma on the identification of fascists. And that's why I kind of use it openly too, because I know it just catches people off guard, because you're not supposed to admit to being that. You're supposed to deny that anytime you're called that. So
I don't see, you identify with Mussolini and with fascism and with, Juan Perón and with Gaddafi in Libya and with North Korea. And I don't see that.
Sankara, let us not forget. Yeah.
Thomas Sankara, right? A Marxist. I mean, I don't see that link. I see, Italian fascism in Ethiopia and Libya as a colonizer. I see Germany invading, the Soviet Union. And I see third world developing countries fighting for their national liberation and using socialist methods to build themselves up. I see two different schools. I don't understand how you can equate them.
Because it's all from third position ideology is what I'm saying, which you're looking at. So we say like Germany invades Russia. Russia was building up to invade Germany. Russia was already taking parts of Europe and expanding. I mean, that was a fight that was going to come to a head because they were so polar opposite as far as what they were trying to do and their fight for power.
1939, the Molotov
power. Yep, which was essentially a stall move. Hitler always believed he can talk Britain into joining him to attack Russia. So
they knew that they knew
they were Anglophile. That's one of his faults. But it's it's like I'm saying, you're just saying the things you find. Like I said, we can nitpick all the deaths and communism killed this much, fascism killed this much, capitalism's still killing today. So I mean, it's more important to focus on how do you deal with what this system is creating and how do we fight that. And it's going to take conversations like that. And you know what? It's going to take people who are coming from political theories that are outside of the norm. So yeah, I understand. I understand you want to distance yourself from anything you would agree with a fascist. So I understand that, but it is still, the gulfs aren't that big. They are little valleys, and more I think Americans are going to come to see that. I'm firmly convinced most Americans are fascists. They just don't know it yet, and it's up to people to get that message out there.
Well, it's been an interesting conversation for sure, and thank you for your time.
Yes, you too. You take care.
Yep.